Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Live Your Purpose podcast. We want to encourage you every single day to live on purpose. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead, follow along on whatever podcast platform. Most of you are listening on Apple Podcasts, so go ahead, hit that plus button or that follow button so that we get to the top of your feed every time there's a new episode. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you go over to YouTube, hit subscribe on that channel over there as well, and follow along. Get us in the algorithm, share the show, all the fun stuff. But we've got a special episode today. Every episode is special, of course, but Quenton is here today, and then Bryce also behind the cameras as well. Bryce will be, he's got a microphone in front of his face. Always dangerous to put a microphone in front of anybody, but especially this guy over here. No, I'm just joking.
Big issues.
But no, thanks so much for joining. We've got a lot to unpack today. Of course, we teased on the previous episode, but if you haven't listened to that, first of all, go back and check out the episode we did with Carissa and Catherine. Outstanding stuff. This is going to be a bit of a change up, obviously, topic-wise, but we're going to go through Quenton. I'm going to call you Q for the podcast purposes, if that's okay. 100%. That's what I've called you since I've known you. But we're going to go through his journey from atheism to now being a church planter. And kind of that's a loaded subject.
That's a weird just sentence to say in general.
Yeah, it's a lifetime of, it's your lifetime condensed into a 30-minute podcast.
This is your life.
Right. But Q is obviously so much more than that. Obviously, Q and I, we did discipleship group together in 2023, right? Was that 2023? And we've done life together. Q is a husband. He's a father. He's an aficionado of many things, pop culture as well. I want to break the ice a little bit, Q. This wasn't in what I sent you, but what are you watching lately? What's hitting? What are the shows? Maybe top 2 or 3 shows that you're watching right now.
Yeah. So this is, brace yourself because this is going to be shocking. So I recently have been, spoiler alert for whenever this comes out, I'm currently in a season of fasting right now, as we were talking about. I am also fasting media. We kind of talked about the food aspect that I was doing, but I'm fasting some media. And so I've chosen for this fast to cut out any content that I'm consuming that has any violence whatsoever or any sort of sexual overtones, period. Which, by the way, if anybody's ever tried to cut sugar out of their diet, it's you basically start to realize that everything has that in some format. Yeah. And so at first I was like, yeah, that'll be good. And then I'm like, I can't watch anything. So in this time of fasting, I have found some new favorites. I downloaded, this is not a Mormon plug, but the BYU TV app. Are you familiar with BYU TV? All right. Brigham Young University. Shout out to them, I guess.
Sugar-free media entertainment.
Yeah, they make just clean content streaming service. It's really funny. They have a hilarious sketch show called Studio C, which I've been starting to watch. They're on season 19, so it's long running. But it's just hilarious, clean comedy. But, guys, I've started watching this show called Random Acts on there, and I have never cried as much in my life because it's like punked, but it's all nice stuff. So, they punk people with, we fixed your car, and, we sent you on a vacation because you're a single mom and have never been able to afford that. It's so good. Haley, my wife, will pop into my office every once in a while, and I'll be watching this during my work day. Sorry, day job. And I am crying. I'm literally, Haley, this is the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. They got this guy his car, and I don't know. It's just so nice. It makes me feel so good. Yeah. So that's what I've been watching. And I will tell you, I'm addicted to it now. I'm addicted to the feels that come with it, So probably didn't expect me to say TV shows from BYU TV.
Definitely expected deep cuts. Definitely did not expect him to go that deep.
Yeah. It's pretty deep.
Yeah, that is.
But yeah, so you're welcome for them now sponsoring this podcast.
Yes. Brought to you by BYU TV.
Everybody needs a good cry. Daily,
It's so good, man. It's so therapeutic. And I used to watch. Have you ever watched? What is that? Undercover Boss. Oh, yeah. Same way. I used to cry all the time when they would like. First off, I would get excited when they like stuck it to the person who's like a bad employee, and they're like, "By the way, I've been the boss the whole time and you're fired now." I was like, yeah. But then also like when they're like, you've been working every Tuesday 17 hours for the last 10 years and you have a family of 20 children and we're giving you all $20,000 each. I would just waterworks.
Yep. 100%.
So that's my new thing. I may just be that dude now that I only choose shows that make me cry.
I mean, might as well.
I'll do that on purpose sometimes.
Yeah.
I'll find videos that will make me emotional just because I like it. Like,
it feels good.
Yeah, you see, someone that's been away serving, Air Force, military, whatever, coming home to their 5-year-old daughter in front of her entire class. Yeah.
That
cut me right in the heart.
It is wholesome. And so now I'm on that kick. That also meant that I had to stop playing a bunch of video games. So I've now like gotten into like puzzle games because those are like safe territory. Same. I think back on that all the time. Haley and I are talking because we're in that phase now with our little ones because I've got 17, 15, 4, 3, and about to be 10 months at this point. And yeah, we're in that phase of like, all right, so like what movies can I start sharing with him? And then I think back through some of those things. And I'm like, oh, Indiana Jones. No, actually, probably not Indiana Jones. Oh, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Oh, that first one was actually kind of dark. If you guys go back and watch it. So maybe not that one. The sequels, maybe okay. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff like that we grew up on that no holds barred. It was the Wild West of media back then for kids.
We were hardened.
Yeah.
At the time, we didn't realize it, but we developed thick skin because of it. Well, this is exciting. You just talked about your family a little bit. I want to know from you, like, what are the 3 things you're most proud of? You carry a lot of titles, obviously, at this point. What are the 3 titles you would say you're most proud of, and why?
Boy, I would say definitively. I'd say. Crazy enough, if you would have asked me the same question 4 years ago, would have not even been close to this. But number 1 title is probably Man of God. That's one that actually means something and is kind of changing the entire trajectory of my life. Second would probably be husband, and the third would probably be father. In that order, probably. I'm impressed. As and people as they get to know me will also learn that I've been through multiple marriages, so I was not always a good husband. Things were really hard and difficult. And I haven't always been the best father either. And so those are 3 titles that I now feel confident claiming. Like, okay, I feel like I can rightfully say those mantles are mine and I'm happy with it. But I think it's because they both directly now feed off of Man of God. Does that make
That's
sense?
great. Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, I see that in your life for sure. So this is going to be kind of a bit of a tale of your journey from atheism to church planter. By no means, because we know that not everybody listening to this podcast is a Christian or a follower of Jesus, things like that. And this isn't meant to necessarily, obviously, we don't want to manipulate anybody into believing any certain way or anything like that. So just a disclaimer as we start that this is your journey, obviously.
100%.
And we hope that it will inspire others to live your purpose, maybe to ask certain questions. And that's kind of where I want to begin, is like that point of questioning, because obviously we could go all the way back. We can go wherever you want to take this.
It all started when I was a young boy.
When I was a boy. What did, first of all, lead you to, because you were a pretty staunch atheist. Like you were like, and the conversations that you and I have had, you would like try to defend that faith aspect.
I would actually define myself as an argumentative atheist. So I wasn't just an atheist, which sometimes can be like passive. I enjoyed engaging people of faith in conversation because I thought they were stupid. And it made me feel mentally superior. So like I would say argumentative atheist was probably the...
How did you get to that point? Like,
straight up, that's a great question. Realistically, now that I've had several years to kind of reflect on it, I think when I first came to God, I would probably say, oh, it was the church, and it was, just me seeing other things that people had. And I think that was a part of it. But now that I've had time to like really unpack it and think about it, I think my atheism was a defense mechanism. And I think it was because, so I grew up in the South where Bibles are aplenty, and churches are aplenty. And growing up there, everybody was kind of in church, and everybody had God, and, parents prayed, and we celebrate these things. And I just felt kind of like an outsider. I went to church as a kid, not regularly, but occasionally. And I would even hit up like youth nights and stuff at a local church. And I always just kind of saw people doing what I assumed was just this kind of like fake show. Like it was this show, like I felt God, I heard God, and God told me. And I'm like, I haven't heard anything like ever from God. And it started to kind of harden me. And I was like, now you're making me feel like I'm the stupid one for not hearing these things or feeling these things, if that makes sense. And so then I think it was just a snowball effect. Like over time, it just kind of hardened me more and more. And then I felt more and more justified as I leaned into kind of poking holes in faith. And so then it just became kind of my stance of like, all of these people are brainwashed, and the church preys on the weak-minded, and that's that.
What would be some of the biggest reasons why you felt like the church was brainwashed? Like, was there specific, like the points that you would make in your argumentative style? Like, what were the top couple of things that you would say you poked holes in?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, a big tenet of the Christian faith is faith, which is an intangible in a lot of ways. And so I think that's the like lowest hanging fruit of just, people being like, oh, it's a feeling. I got a word, I like have, and it's like, it would show me like how is that a measurable thing, So that was one. I think another one felt like, and now that I'm in the church and kind of the church, I understand the perspective now a little bit differently because it's like living on the flip side of the coin. But at the time, I would see these churches, these kind of like mega churches that were popping up because I'm a kid of the 90s. So that's when like mega churches were happening, and I was seeing them pop up, and I was just seeing these exorbitant amount of money just spent. And it felt like, this is like the best scam ever. Like as a person who is unashamedly, crafty when I was younger, I liked a good deal. I liked being in sales. I was a very salesy person. I was like, this is a good sales pitch. Like you guys got a good racket going. This is a great way to make a lot of money. So I think being able to kind of position that as well of like, okay, well, tell me of the $1.5 million that your church raised this year, how much of that actually went to some form of outreach or furthering? And a lot of times, transparently, the answer was, I don't know, or I think we threw a party or something for these people. Oh, cool. So where's the rest of that money? You know what I mean? And then it just kind of, again, it just supported this idea of like, okay, so really this is going to sound really like conspiracy theory, but it's like mind control. And I don't mean that in like the hypnotist kind of way, but mind control in the sense of like keeping people oppressed. If you study history, people can use sort of like position and power to kind of enslave people mentally. And it just felt like that. It felt like, well, the church is just another layer of that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just deception, manipulation, things like that. I mean, absolutely. And there's plenty of documentaries out there outlining churches that have been that way.
And that didn't help the cause either. You know what I mean? Like when you actually have churches that are doing exactly what I'm sort of positing, and I have more examples that I can point to of that than you can point to of your feeling or your word, starts to make the argument a lot easier.
It does. Would you say, as a argumentative atheist, that it required you to continually have faith in, I mean, people from our seat would be like, well, you have faith in nothing, right? Obviously, so you still have faith. You're still putting your belief system in something. Was that ever part of your arguments that you would have with people, or?
So I think here's the like weird, here's the rub, if you will. As a kid, I think I always secretly hoped that like magic was real. My logic and my brain said that it's not, and my life experience said that it's not. But I think that there was always a piece of me that, all right, you're a Star Wars kid, right?
Right, absolutely.
How many times have you sat by yourself and like tried to move things with the Force?
100%, Bryce. Okay. You know, we've done this.
Okay.
Tricked times. Each other.
Same. And so I think there was always a part of me that was this like, that wanted to be Force sensitive, you know, that wanted to be like, I'm pretty sure I saw that coin move on my desk. Like, I'm pretty sure that happened. So I think that part of it kept it alive in me and kept me kind of, I guess you could say it kept the door cracked on what my heart and my head felt like was a very closed door. Does that make sense?
It does.
So thanks, George Lucas, I guess.
Yeah. He's the spiritual element of Star Wars is alive and well.
Yeah. Man, what a weird podcast. BYU TV, George Lucas. We're all over the map on this. So much stuff to feed the algorithm.
You could toss in Avatar: The Last Airbender as well, as far as being a kid and hoping that you could bend the water, or that the wind blowing the leaves was actually you doing so.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%.
And there's a common thread there with Dave Filoni to tie it back to Star Wars as well. I mean, for those who really want to nerd out on the show about that kind of stuff, but I've heard so much of your journey at this point. Obviously, you and I were closely tied for a full year of life, which is awesome. And your story of conversion began with, well, I guess I don't know exactly where it began necessarily, or maybe I do. But let's talk about that, because Meadows Church, where we attend currently at the time of this recording together, which will change in the future depending on when you're listening to this, but we do this thing called 1 for 1, and 1 for 1 is a ministry that we have the whole congregation gets an opportunity every single week to put $1 in a bucket. The dollars get added up over the course of a month, and we have the opportunity and ability as church congregation members to nominate people that we know, specifically people who don't know Jesus, to receive this large amount of money. Am I right in saying this is kind of where your conversion began, or was it before the 1 for 1? And talk about both of those things.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think are you familiar with the idea of prevenient grace?
No, let's hear it.
All right. So prevenient grace is the concept that like God went before you even before salvation and like protected you from certain things in your life. So like since finding faith, I think back on prevenient grace, and I can point to like a million different points in my life that God pulled me out of the fire before I even like acknowledged his existence.
Just you wait.
Because, yeah. I'm going to play such a practical joke on you. It's going to be hilarious. So I think if I'm looking at it from like the other side of the field and I look back, I think there were a million points in my life where I was presented with opportunities by God and saved from things in my life that he was kind of all over, and now that just adds to his glory on this side. So I think it started at all of those different points. I think it chipped away at the block, if you will. I think a huge shift came when I married my wife. She's a believer, and I was not, and she was not really forceful with her kind of belief structure. We just kind of left it, you can believe in your imaginary God and I will not, and we'll go on about our relationship and it'll be cool. But I saw in her, she is maybe, and this is going to sound like I'm just a I Love Haley podcast, and it probably should be, but she was genuinely one of the kindest, most thoughtful, most genuine people that I had ever met in my life. And it presented this conundrum of like, I've met a lot of people and I've never met anybody that I felt was like really, truly a loving person. Everybody has motives, you know what I mean? And it started me scratching my head of like, what is different? You know what I mean? What is different here? And so I think over the course of our relationship, every once in a while, something would happen and she would like attribute it to God. And she'd be like, I don't know.
The evidence
not
is
for
piling
nothing,
up.
but like that kind of seems like a God thing to me. And I'd be like, I don't know. Here's a logic point that turns it into something real and not me trying to use the force. And so I think those as well also kind of chipped away at the block. And then it came to a head in February of 2021 when I had moved I'm from Tennessee originally. We had moved to Omaha. We moved without jobs and broke as a joke. And I was writing comic books and doing podcasting and stuff at the time. And it was super cold. So for those who don't know, in Omaha, it gets ridiculously cold. And I think it was like -17 outside. Furnace broke. I heard it. My family's asleep. We had a 6-month-old son at the time. And literally my heart just drops through my body onto the floor because I'm like, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I just broke. Like in that moment, I had a wife who loved me and I was experiencing love in a relationship like I had never felt before, like a genuine love, not a love with strings or attachments or needs, but somebody I was feeling what I assumed at the time was like the closest feeling of like just unconditional love. And then we had just had our son, Theodore. And so I was feeling overwhelmingly protective and in that, new parent cycle, you know what this feels like. You know what this feels like. And so I think it broke me because I realized in that moment, here I am writing comic books, editing podcasts, broke. Our house just broke. It's very cold outside. And I just realized that I am not this man that I present myself to be. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a father because I'm not caring for my family. I'm caring for me. I'm caring for my aspirations and my dreams. And it was the lowest point I've ever felt in my life. Like I suddenly felt very undeserving of all of these things that I had, all these labels, all these mantles and titles that I had given myself. And I cried, hard cry, gross, ugly face crying, solo by myself in my office. And I didn't know what to do. I literally was like, I'm a failure of a husband. I'm a failure of a father. There's nowhere, this is very hopeless. And then I had this weird force. I want the force to be real moment. And it was by myself. And so I'm like, there's nothing else I can do. So I'm just going to throw it out there. And in the midst of my tears, I'm like, listen, God, if you're real, if you care about me at all, if you hear me, I am telling you right now, if you fix this situation, if you save me from being a failure of a father, being a failure of a husband, help me not let my family freeze in this 17-degree weather, I will do anything you want. That's it. And then I sat and nothing happened. And I was like, thought so, and I was hoping for that force moment where I pray this prayer and all of a sudden a light shines down on my furnace and I just hear like elves working and it's like ting, 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 ting. Everything is just repaired. And then I can be like, you are real, God, or Jesus shows up with a tool belt and is like, I'm here to fix your furnace, exactly. And none of that happened. And I felt even more disheartened. You know what I mean? Like, honestly. And then and I don't know how deep into this we want to get, but I'll share kind of the Reader's Digest version. Although I always want to share the 3-hour version because it brings more glory to God. But the Reader's Digest version is essentially that over the next day and a half of me being completely powerless and realizing that I had no control on bettering my wife or my situation in that moment, through my wife's faith and connecting with other people of faith through her workplace, who just happened to be connected to Meadows, I felt the unstrings attached love of complete strangers for the first time in my life. It had happened through my relationship, but I'm a charming dude. I convinced my wife to love me. You know what I mean? These were people who had never met me. They don't know me. I could be a mass murderer for all they know. Like, literally, there's no... when does this air? We got to move. It rocked my logic brain. That makes no sense. There's nothing to gain here for these people. And we got blessed. The church, Meadows Church, ended up paying for our furnace after 3 more kind of steps of hopelessness that I took. And when we got the phone call that this was going to happen, it rocked me so hard to my core. I couldn't even bear to listen to the person that was on the phone with my wife telling her the news. It physically pained me to hear it because it was, bring it all full circle. It's just like watching those BYU Random Acts episodes where I was so overwhelmed with the feeling of love, unconditional love, God's love, I now know, that it hurt me because my body was so full of just self-righteousness and sinful nature and hate and manipulation and anger and unforgiveness that it didn't compute. It it short-circuited my brain. And I went into my garage and I just collapsed on the floor because I couldn't hear it. I couldn't listen to it because I'm so undeserving. I literally felt like Peter felt when, he saw Jesus and was like, I am the grossest of the gross. Please don't. I'm a lowly person who doesn't deserve love. Don't love me. And I'm on the floor in the garage and I am ugly face crying, which is a theme you'll probably see a lot in my life. But I'm ugly face crying. And I mentioned earlier, my wife tends to ask me when things happen. She's like, seems like a pretty God thing, right? And she popped her beautiful head out of the garage and she was like, hey, you believe in God? And I, for the first time in my life, without hesitation, without anything, it just came out of me. And I was like, yes, I do. And from that point on, I would love to say that and the next day we were at Meadows Church and then my life was completely different. But we baby stepped it. and we started watching some messages online, and I was like, I got to see what these people are about. This was weird and crazy. I'd already felt the love. I had the encounter, you know what I mean? So now it's just trying to rectify, what does that mean for me? You know what I mean? What does that mean for my life? Like, now that I've felt that, now that God has called me on my bet, what does the, like, I'll do anything you want look like? You know what I mean? And there's a million times that I'm like, I hope that anything you want just happens to align with everything I want.
Exactly.
That would be great. Spoiler alert, it doesn't like at all. And I don't know if God, that's just the relationship I have with God as this like hilarious practical joker who's like, you know what's really funny is like the fact that you thought you were so smart and you did all these things, and guess what? Now you're going to serve me for the rest of your life. Isn't that amazing? And I'm like, yes, it is amazing. Like, somehow I'm both very excited and so like I was a complete moron. But that was the moment for sure that like everything changed. Like, again, it didn't all change in a rush. It wasn't like the dam broke, but the crack got a lot bigger. Yeah. And then slowly over time, I found out what it meant when I had made that promise of I'll do anything you want. And it turns out it was a lot more than I bargained for,
Yeah, it's a daily counting of the cost and a lot of listening, as you mentioned before. I mean, just like, what you had heard about people in the faith prior to you joining the church or being a follower of Christ yourself, as hearing from God and all those sorts of things seem so mystical and mythical and not real until you experience it and open yourself up to it, which frankly, I mean, it's not an easy place to get for any of us, whether you grew up in the faith, whether you grew up without faith, anything like that. And so I want to kind of fast forward it to the point to where so daily you've been counting the cost. You've been coming to the church. You've given your life to the Lord. You've been baptized, all these crazy, awesome things, serving in the church. Now you're planting a church, which for those that are listening that have no idea, like, what does that even mean? Q is going to be the pastor of a church that God has called him to now that he is, gotten the call from the Lord, which is awesome and incredible. And it's just, there's so many stories within the story. But what was that moment like for you in terms of knowing that call was there from the God? I hate to say just hearing the call from God, because a lot of times God doesn't speak in audible ways, right? It's a lot of times just a conviction that in your heart that like he confirms over time. What's that journey been like for you to have that confirmed, that calling?
Yeah, that was a really good explanation, because that's 100% accurate. And I think part of the problem that I had in understanding it and understanding faith and those things is because it's not often, not that it can't be, but it is often not an audible, I hear, like, I have an earpiece in, God's talking to me. What's that update? Okay, cool. Thanks, God. But it is like an internal kind of feeling. So what I've learned, and I don't know that this is true for everybody, is that oftentimes when I get a feeling of something I do not want to do, it is usually God prompting me to do something.
Can't be the things we want.
Yeah. Oftentimes, and that's kind of the amazing thing about my relationship with God, is that, like, even though it seems on the outside that initially I don't want to do those things, every single time I step into doing them, it is greater than anything else I could have imagined, like, wanting to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Would you say that's been the most difficult aspect of your faith in Christ, is to wrestle with those, like, it's not just pruning. It's not just like eliminating this former life. It's now also falling in line of obedience. On top of that, it's like, okay, that's what true repentance is, right? Is like going a completely different direction. Would you say that's been the most difficult aspect of transitioning to a life of faith, or what would you say has been the most difficult thing?
Yeah,
maybe?
That's good. So I think it's kind of all of the above. So it's the realization that, like, that I want to hold on to my old life desperately, right? Like, at least I did for a long time. And it's because they're the things that make me comfortable. They're it's what defined me, right? For a long time, I hosted a podcast for like 7 years and was doing all sorts of like entertainment related things. That's what I thought that's me. Like when somebody said like, who is Q? They were like, oh, he's the podcast dude. He's the movie dude, you know? He's a comic book guy. And so it was the hardest part has been like divorcing that idea of what I and the world built me to be and learning and downloading what God had actually intended me to be. Does that make sense? Oh, yeah. So it's trying to figure out like, okay, what part of me is a part that I attached and what part of me is a part that God attached. And so that sorting has been really difficult. And there's been tons of times I'm holding on to something that I'm like, please God, tell me that that this was a you thing and not a me thing. And oftentimes I find out that's not the case, you know? So that's probably been the most difficult piece. Right up there with that kind of pruning and recognizing that I don't know myself at all is probably the realization that when you're a person who has a lot of trust issues and damage and trauma from childhood and young adulthood and lifehood, it's very hard to trust someone completely. And we're called to trust God completely, right? Like all our heart, all our mind, all our soul, like we're supposed to buy in. And that's kind of the caveat of like God being like, all right, I'll do stuff in your life, but like you have to trust me completely. And I will say that, you know, for probably a year or two into my walk, I was, faking it till you making it. I was wanting to trust. I was telling myself that I trusted and just hoping that feeling would actually catch. Does that make sense? Yeah. And now I realize that I was baby stepping into a trusting relationship with God. You know what I mean? That God was like slowly he was showing me that I could trust him. You know, he wasn't just like, well, trust me. And I'm like, why? And he's like, I don't know, because my word says you should, you know? Instead, he knows me because he designed me and he knows exactly what I needed. And he knows that I was still seeking with an earnest heart, even though I wasn't fully trusting right away. I still wanted to trust, and he knew that. And so he led me hand in hand, kind of like on that journey. And I would love to say that I am now at a place where my trust is 100% perfect, but we were having a conversation offline prior to recording this. And I was kind of talking about like something that's ringing true for me lately is the whole needing to, you know, enter the kingdom of God with kind of the vision, the sight, the mindset of a child, the heart of a child, right? And so like that is trust. Children have infinite, unwavering trust. Like my kids just trust that I'm going to feed them every day.
Yeah, take care
which is
of
like crazy. Needs. Like that I will like clothe them and not just like throw them out in the cold. Like they just trust blindly, like fully willingly. That has probably been the most difficult thing, is to revert myself back to a pre-hard or world hardened stage and start just openly trusting that my Father is going to feed me and clothe me and take care of me and not abandon me.
And the great thing is that, I mean, when you experience this, you know, but it's like God doesn't ask us to follow him with blind faith based on what we know about our children, if you have children, things like that, like what Q is talking about. The crazy thing is that when God calls us to something, when he calls us to a life of faith, like substantially, he proves himself time and time again. He never fails on a promise, right? And that's the cool thing, is that like where our minds go is oftentimes towards like, okay, this is uncertain to me. I don't know the outcome, and therefore I don't know that I fully trust. Whereas God has this huge file cabinet, 1 million files deep, and he's like, okay, which miracle do you want me to go back to? Because we have this entire cabinet of them. Like you said, the provincial grace, prevenient grace. I mean, that's the cool thing about it, is that like our faith is built up over a lifetime of these things, right? And so I love that. I love that that's a basis and a foundation for your faith, is like God proving in substantial ways to somebody who used to say like, okay, well, prove that to me logically then. And God's like, boom, here's your fixed XYZ. And I love that aspect of your journey with him.
Yeah. Can I add one thing to that, though? Because I think it's important, too, that, like, while, yes, there have been some things that he's been like, boom, here you go. I think he also, the interesting part is, while I'm like, show me your logic, show me logically or tangibly the thing, I think God has also been like, why? Why do you need to see that thing? And he's made me reflect on that of like, we just went through a message on Sunday, the like waiting well, right? It's basically him being like, do you actually need this like hard line evidence in all things? Or do you just need to kind of work through why you think you need these things?
You just need more of my presence.
Yeah. Do you need to just be with me? You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying is like, I liked your filing cabinet analogy, and I'll take it a step further, that in that filing cabinet, there are design instructions for every one of us. And God just pulls out, dusts off the blueprints when he made us. And he's like, I know exactly how to get Q from point A to point B. I know exactly how he's wired. I know exactly how his thoughts operate because I designed them. So the question is, what has the world done? What sort of wiring has he added to this design? And then I don't need to just like snap my fingers and rewire him. Instead, it'll build a more meaningful relationship if he just allows me to slowly repair him. Does that make sense? And so that also builds trust, because as I see things of myself fall away and I'm like, oh, wait, come back. I like that part of me. The further I get from it, the more I'm like, oh, you know what? Like, I actually didn't need that piece of me at all. Like, that's so weird that I thought that I like really needed that. And so I think that's kind of the important thing too, is as somebody who was on the atheist side, I don't want to tell anybody ever that to expect evidence. Sure. Now, can you expect evidence? Totally. Will God give you evidence? Sure. Can he? Absolutely. But the question is what do you need as a person individually to get there? Because it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not going to be the same pathway or journey for everybody. Right. And that's hard for at least me in my atheism to grasp, because it seemed like everybody got the same memo, and it was actually me feeling outside of that memo, which led to my disconnect from God. But it was embracing my relationship with God and realizing that disconnect from the memo is actually what makes my unique connection with God special.
It is. And I think to kind of land this plane, because I know we could talk for hours, and I am too, and I love that. But I think that the thing that I really want to leave people with is, what's that common thread about you? Like, what's the thing that's the common denominator throughout your entire story? That's like, you talked about how God knows you. He knitted you in your mother's womb. He knows you inside and out. He knows your heart. And Scripture says that he doesn't man looks at the outward appearance. God looks at our heart. Like, what is that common thread about Q that's going to lead you into this, from where you've been into this journey now as a church planter going forward?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a bunch so far, and it's that I am still that kid trying to move a penny on a desk with the Force. And now I'm just a bigger version of that kid who realizes that it's not actually me who's going to move the penny. I just got to know the guy who does. You know what I mean? So that's the through line. I'm always going to try and move it, but now I just know that it's not going to be under my own power, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. What do they say in Star Wars? It's not, you're not using the Force. It's like the Force it's all around us, you know. It's it binds us, you know. I can't remember the entire quote from Obi-Wan Kenobi, but it's that thing that's like, okay, when you're that childlike wonder, you're like, okay, I can move this penny with my Force powers, and yet the concept of that is flawed, right? It's like, it's not that you have Force powers, it's that you've tapped into what's all around you, which in our context is the Holy Spirit. And it's not a necessarily a wielding of this power to be like, okay, I can wave my hand around, but it's more so of faith that, okay, when we set high expectations because he's the God of miracles, and we believe big things because we've seen him do big things. We've seen him do great things. And like you and I and Bryce were talking about off the air, like Jesus said, you will do the same and greater things than even I have done. And I believe that over your area of ministry as well. And I can't wait for people who are listening to get to know you better as well in this journey. And I just think that it's such a huge, pivotal thing that we all come to grips at some point with. I mean, this questioning, this idea of like, well, why? Like, why Jesus? Why turn to this faith? And so
Yeah, I love it, and honestly, I appreciate you creating the space to talk about it. And it's been a wild journey, and I know the exciting part is this is just like the beginning. And so catch up with me in a couple of years, and we'll see if that penny's moved.
Yep, we'll have part 2, 3, however many we need to of this discussion here. But we appreciate you so much for listening. If you have any questions for Q, I mean, shove them back. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Forget those questions. We do not have time for questions.
Yeah,
no.
we're not doing. This isn't a question and answer session. This is a podcast. You listen to us talk.
Exactly. So no, but we appreciate you so much for listening. Again, if you haven't done so already, hit subscribe, like, share, all the good stuff to get the word out there about this show, and especially just to support your journey, right? Obviously.
Yeah, please. You know, I love inviting conversation now. As I was an argumentative atheist, I am a conversation-loving Christian. And so I would love if people want to engage, if they want to ask questions, please do. Reach out to Meadows, follow Meadows. You'll see when the church launches and when the church plant happens. I'm going to just like put a flyer out there. If you want to send me an email yourself, you can reach me at Quentonbrodnak at Gmail. I would
put it in the description.
I would love to field questions or outreach. Yeah.
It's just such a pivotal before and after, right? It's a dramatic story of life change, and that's really what we're all about with this podcast, living your purpose. We want to encourage you to do that every day. And again, like Q said, I mean, it's not overnight for everybody especially when it comes to your faith journey. But again, if you have any questions, we'll throw some stuff in the description, ways that you can reach out and things like that. But we appreciate you so much for tuning in today. And the next episode, we're not exactly sure what it's going to be on yet. Maybe me and Bryce will do a little chat about being dads, moving to Omaha, things like that. Dad chat. Yeah, Bryce is a new dad as of this year. And so,
can I please say I've been itching since the beginning. I just want to say, smash that like button.
Smash. Yeah, I've never actually smashed the like or the subscribe button, but I'm gonna go on there and I'm gonna do that for somebody's channel. I'm just gonna smack the heck out of my keyboard.
Just punch my screen.
Yeah, and hope for the best.
Send them an invoice and be like, "You told me to smash it. I did. This is a $200 monitor.
You need to replace my stuff." We appreciate all of you so much. We'll catch you on the next episode. See you soon.